Okay, I will talk about object-oriented programming in Python. My understanding is really limited, so please take it with a grain of salt. Um, so we create a class. The class have a list of methods, and we'll explore them in details. And those are the basic of object. So we define it as if it were somewhat like a function, and by standard, you you initialize it with the different input, and at the beginning you have a self. Basic self is pretty much the object itself, and you make self dot x equal to x. Basically means the attribute, which is it has like a few, that's a jargon. Like attribute is pretty much the things inside of the object. Within the object is the attribute, and you define the attribute. You can give it a, just like a function, you can give it an initial like a default value, and dot type. So those are like above class. You can give it a property of the class in the class level, and also you can create a private variables. There's different method. Let's talk about method. There's uh, instance method that is can be the functions that can be used within the class. It's just like a function. How to access it is pretty much, if you create an object, here is when you how to create an object. You have three variables, as you can see here, x, y, and dot type input. So you have 5, 2, and dot type 0, and the way to use those method, or in a way a function within the class, is just c, like the object that you get, dot the function name, the method, and if it has variable in it, you just put a variable in it. So within the method, it's just pretty much a normal method. You just define it as if it were a function. Um, Outside of the normal method, we have within this frame, we're going to talk a little bit about class method and the static method. Class method is pretty much involve the method that you are fiddling with a class, CLS class. So say the class under the class there's dot type is is the attribute of the class, not the attribute of the object. A static method is the method that you still fiddling with with the class level, not object level, but it doesn't involve any object itself. In the detail, I'm not very I'm not very clear on those concepts, to be honest. You can check on more details. There's some very good documents on class method versus static method. Outside from that, you for the function you always have to declare self, because you're going to use self unless you don't need to, then you don't need to add anything. And outside of that, you can add as much variable as you want. So those are variables, just like the function. You have a lot of variables, and you can give them default, like defining a function. For uh, uh, for private variable is a it's common for people to add a underscore to make it to indicate that it's a private variable, therefore thus cannot be accessed outside of the um, the class. Outside, yeah. So there's a few functions that is easy to useful to know has attribute, like it's if to check that object has certain attribute, for instance the attribute name private variable, like that. So let's look into this program. I define a dot object. It has type 0, type 1, type 2, and I will have a class method that check the type called get type. Basically, it will print out the type of the class of the pretty much the dot I have, and there's static method. I have pretty much return the list of dots. And then we can if we don't do those jets, the first things to do is pretty much initiation. There's a few variables that I want to have within the object, and we put them into the given object and with the defined numbers, and we'll check if the defined dot type input is within the dot type here. Otherwise, if not, then I will raise an error. Otherwise, I will put it into the object. And here are some instance functions. X pretty much x multiplied by y, and then x multiplied times y times a. And we can set a private variable, and we can check if the attribute private variable is set. And outside of the class, now is pretty much the whole definition of the class is done. We create an instance, create an object, 52 type 0, and we check the type of C. It should show me as object, and check its instinct dot object. Check if C is the instance of dot object. It should show me true because it is dot object. And print out the C will be an object, of course, and to print out the property of the x and y, and print out the result of x times y and x times y times 2, and get the type of the C, get the attribute type of the class, and check if we have the private variable attribute, which we defined here, and then we check if we set it should show false because we haven't set the private variable. Now we set the private variable and then check it again, and then we can get the dot list, and we append the list to the dot list and print it out. And here are some more information. I will put the link of the my GitHub repository of this into description.